My name is Leon Smith. Over the past 5 years, I've spent some time studying an old preacher whose name was J.W. Little. The people around here all called him Preacher Jimmy Little, and he was really worth the study. I have a few things I want to show you about artifacts from his life. Here are some letters written with his own hand on tablet paper and pencil. Here is the Bible that he carried in his pocket. Here's a book about prayer that I was given. And you notice when I turn inside, we have his name, J.W. Little, Wingate, North Carolina. We're going to look at J.W. Little of Wingate, North Carolina, and how he preached and how he prayed, and how he became a man that was well worth the study in just a minute.
He said, "Fire away, my soul will be in heaven before the smoke dies out."
Then he prayed for rain, said it clouded up, and a large rain came up.
And the little boy fell, and when he did, the stick went through his jugular veins, and it caused him to die. And this
whooped him down so bad he gave it our old coat. What it's referring to is to give the best you have.
And there's 22 souls saved there in the ballpark. It just broke the ball game up.
When Preacher Little started preaching, he did not hold back. He would rear back, as the old folks say, and he'd let her go. We have some videotape of a man who actually heard Jimmy Little preaching in Marshville, and I want us to take a look at it now. The man's name is Olin Haney, and he's from Marshville, North Carolina. Let's look.
My first acquaintance with Preacher Jimmy Little was at Marshville at a fair. It was in late October. The year was 1913. They was having a fair at Marshville. They had a large field fenced in, and the fair was going on. And Preacher Little was there, and he would preach to the people downtown. There's a pretty good-sized cotton platform, and the people of the community raised cotton for a money crop, and there's where they sold their cotton. And the platform was loaded with cotton, and they threw some off on the ground. Well, Preacher Little stood on a bale of cotton to preach, and he used for his text, "Wine is a mockery, strong drink is raging, and whosoever is deceived thereby is not wise."
We were lucky enough to find these very posters that Mr. Haney talked about, and I believe he may have something else to say about them. I'm not sure. Is that the case? Let's take a look then at the cut with Olin Haney, and then we'll look at those very posters that we used in Marshville more than 60 years ago.
He had a large poster picture, some 2 feet square, something like that, and he had the picture of a burning fire, represented hell. On another one, he had a drunk man lying out here in a liquor jug beside him. He didn't say whiskey. He didn't say brandy. He said liquor. And says this man had a jug of liquor, and it showed to be half to 2/3 gone. The man had drunk himself almost to death. And he had another picture with a tree and a vulture sitting up in the tree, waiting on this drunk man that had drunk himself to death, and he was dead, waiting on him to get to the stage where the vulture would devour him.
The Wages of Sin posters are the ones here, and they were painted by a man whose name was H.F. Wolfe. The document I have in my hand here was typed up by Preacher Jimmy's son, who was Jamie Little, also a famous pastor of our region. He used a text from 1 John 3 and 4, and he titled these things The Wages of Sin. 1 John 3 and 4 says, whosoever committeth sin trespasseth also the law, for sin is a transgressor of the law. Let's take a look at these. First one, we have the whiskey hawk. You can say this bird of prey is talking about molesting people. You can see the whiskey hawk here. You can see the family over here with 2 children, a father, a mother, and another child. And Preacher Jimmy would say, this bird will get you if you don't watch out. The next poster, and these are quite old as you can tell, and I'm having a little bit of trouble getting them to turn, but I'll have them in just a second. The next one is very vivid to me. You'll notice that up here is something that looks like a vulture. Preacher Jimmy would probably call this a buzzard. If you look over here, you can see that it says, this bird of prey must not be molested in the U.S. Now look at the buzzard's children. This says a saloon. The nest is called a saloon, and then the buzzard's children are murder, corruption, and lust. Now look at his prey over here. If you look down here, you can see the father coming home from the plant where he worked. Here's the gate to the house. Here are his older child, I suspect. And here's another young child in his arms, another child, and the mother with the baby here. And the painting is called, although it's hard to see it down at the bottom, the painting is called Watching for Prey. The next poster, and these are, as I wanted to remind you, these are the actual ones that Preacher Jimmy used. We notice over here that we've got woe and contention and strife, and this painting over here, there is a man who is manning this cannon. There's another man who looks like he likes alcohol pretty well. You can notice he has the bottle in his pocket. Notice his house is not taken too good a care of. There are things like whiskey and wine and cider and rum on these cannonballs. Then over here we have a family, a mother and 2 children. The daughter here looks as if she is not exactly sure how to react to these people. Notice the happy home on this side. Notice the unhappy home on this side. The next poster, these are muslin. They're hand-painted by a man whose name was H.F. Wolfe. The only way I know that is his name is on some of them. All right, this one is the one that people remember the most. This one's quite vivid, probably because of the red dragon or red crocodile down here in the water. Notice that the man who is hanging here is hanging by a hook in his back, and he is suspended over the image of this crocodile. His sins are about to get him. Up here you can see it's small, but you can see it. There is a buzzard, and there are several other buzzards flying, waiting for the dead person who's thrown his life away because of alcohol. During the time Preacher Jimmy preached, and he was preaching from about 1875 to 1921, during a large portion of that time, alcohol was a big problem. This saloon is called a near beer saloon, and this is a blind tiger, which is another word I understand for this sort of saloon. Notice here that the father is on the way, or the preacher is trying to attack the blind tiger. We don't know what will happen. Notice that these helpless people are there, his family. Notice the unconcerned man over here on this side. You can see that he's reading a newspaper while the preacher is attacking the sin. The next poster is a very vivid one as well because of the colors. We've got 2 men here, one of whom is very famous. Over on this side we have Napoleon, and he is fairly recognizable. Above Napoleon, the poster says, "I have slain my hundreds." Then over here we have the Whiskey King, and above him it says, "I have slain my thousands." And of course there are bottles all over the place. So the Whiskey King had killed more people than Napoleon. Another of the most vivid of these posters is this scene from hell. Let's start on the left-hand side of it. On the left-hand side, you can see this skeleton. The skeleton is frightening this man. If you'll notice the man that down below him who is lying there, notice that something is coming out of his mouth, or this may be the part of the skeleton's bone. I can't tell. In some of these drawings, something coming from the mouth was the man's soul leaving. But since he is already in hell, perhaps his soul is already gone. Notice what has chained him. You can tell here that there is a chain attached to this man's midsection, and it is labeled rum. Right above him, we see an awful-looking snake. Then above here, a green one with a red mouth, and a speckled black and gray one. Notice right up above that, the flying dragon. And then over beside him, the Prince of Evil himself, complete as you look down with pitchfork. So this is a very vivid poster, and this one has been mentioned by many people. Many people who saw this thing 65 years ago still remember this poster. This poster shows the path from a good life to a bad life. If you'll notice in here in the very center, we see a church. We see also here, down below the church a little way, we see a fork in the road. Notice what's happening in the fork in the road. Two people are beginning to smoke. If we come down to the right-hand side of the road, we see the progression going a little further. We see them playing poker, sitting on a log out in the woods playing poker. Then if we come directly to the left of that, we see along the road people reading trashy literature, at that time called a dime novel. If we go directly below the dime novel, we see a dance hall painting. There's a dancing girl here in the dance hall, and she has her fan. Down below and to the side of her are some men shooting pool in a pool room. And then over here there is an empty saloon, and you can see the bottles over here. And at the very bottom, which you can't see here, is the signature H.F. Wade, who painted Wolf, who painted the paintings. All right, this one tells a story too. This one is aged more than some of them, but perhaps you can see it. Let's start by looking at the very center of the forest. If you can look right here where I have my hand, you'll be able to see three men. There's one face here, a darker face, a light face here, another darker face, although the painting has become faded. Notice the long rifle shot. The fire comes out, there's smoke, and down here we see the victim. Notice this man is taking his last drink. If we will look to the left of this man, we will see his friend who is leaving. We don't know what happened. I don't know what story Preacher Jimmy told, but this man perhaps got him in trouble, and now he's sneaking off, leaving his friend to die and be eaten by the buzzards. Let me show you the second phase of that. This painting has two parts. The second phase, start at the tree again, but go over here to this area. And here we can see in the tree, see the buzzards, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and here they're beginning to come in. You can see them coming in there and beginning to light. Now if we go directly down from that, we'll be able to see what has happened to the man. He lies there. His head is difficult to make out, but there it is, and there's blood coming from it. Here is his hat. And so the tale is told for him. He died a drunk. The final poster in this series deals with an actual event, and you can tell it from looking at this poster. This is a court scene, as you can tell, and it's called a judicial recall, and the date on the bottom of the poster is H.F. Wolf, 1912. These things were painted by hand. All right, notice what's going on. Something caused this mountain man to come into this courtroom and kill these people. I suspect it had to do with alcohol. If you will come from him directly over, you can see that the judge has died. There has been a lot of shooting going on, and he's fallen across the bench. Here's a piece of glass from the globes that were above him. If we come all the way over here to the side, we can see a juror who is dying. And if you will notice here, this smoke shows that the juror's soul is going up. If we come up just a little bit with the camera perhaps, and we can see it right here. That's the soul moving up. Now, if we can come down here to the center of the courtroom, we can see the clerk and the attorney, and both of them have been killed. And their souls are mounting up to heaven. One here, and this one which you can see clearer here. Now, with these posters, Jimmy Little would have made the point that people should not use alcohol. If you use alcohol, it's going to cause you trouble.